Hey guys, this is Carrie, and in today's lesson, we had this opener. Let me just refresh my webpage here. We had this opener, and there was something new about it that hopefully you keyed in on, which is we are able to group together all of the items here. So what I'm going to be teaching you in this lesson is how do we group together a whole bunch of things, like an H2, an H3, an image, and all this stuff, so we can style them as a group and put them all in a box together. Well, it actually turns out to be pretty simple to do. Basically what we do is if we want to group these things together, let me just move this down here so we can see that grouping here. Basically what we do is we just put all of the items we want to group inside of something called a div, which is a new element for us. Now div stands for divider, but I think it's more useful to think about it as an empty or like an unstyled box. We put the start of our unstyled box here, and we close that unstyled box here, and then everything in here is all grouped together, and we can style the div to style the whole group together. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be doing this with our tech blog. So let me catch up and open up my tech blog. So heading over to my REPLs, I think it's just tech blog for me. Let's run it. All right, now I've got my entries. I'm going to just pop it open as a full screen. And there's nothing sort of coherent about this that shows that these are separate blog entries. So what I want to do is I want to put the first one all together as a blog entry. And then I want to put the second one all together as a blog entry as well. So going over here, basically all we need to do is add those div elements into our HTML. So I'm trying to figure out here, well, where does my first blog post start? Well, it starts here with robots are taking over. So I'm going to start my first unstyled box, my first div there. And then I'm going to go down and I'm just going to, for each of the elements, tab them over once more to show that they are inside of this div. This is still part of my first entry, and then here I would move on to my second entry. So instead, I'm typing as I'm talking here. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to press enter after the last component for my first entry and before the title of my second entry. I'm going to delete my indentation here, and I'm going to close up that box by putting a /div, which will close that element. Now when I press run here, you'll notice, or when I refresh this page, you'll notice that absolutely nothing has changed. And the reason why is that div doesn't come with any styles of its own. So in order to show you this, the usefulness of this div, I have to transition now over to here and start to style that div. So I'm going to snap that off to the side here so that we can start to work on it. So the first thing that I want to do, thinking about this little spooky dog example, we want to have the div not take up the entire width of the screen, because I like to have it kind of like so that my text box is a little subsection. Like here, it's just a little subsection. It doesn't span the whole page. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the width of the div to be 80% of the page width. And this is similar to what we did with the image, where we set the height of it. But by setting the div width, I think things will look a lot cooler on my page. So I'm also going to thinking about making it easier to read. I'm going to add a background to mine that's gold, and I'm going to add a border to it as well. And if you got to do the advanced styling, you'll remember from your border that you have to give it a pixel measurement, a type of border, solid, and a color. So I'm going to make it purple. All right, now if we run this, we can see that these have all been grouped together to make a blog entry. Now there is some styling still left to do here, it looks like. So one thing that stands out to me is I'd like this div box to be centered within the page. And we're going to center that div box within the page using some similar code to what we used for centering our image. So to center the div block, we're going to say display, not inline, sorry, display block, the same as we have for centering the image here. And then we're going to say that the margins on this page should be auto-calculated so that it will center it within those margins. All right, so let's run it. I'm going to refresh it here. And I've got my blog entry much more encapsulated. So I think this is a good point to pause with my CSS and transition over back to the blog entry in the HTML. So the same way that I've grouped all of these blog entries components together to make a blog entry, I'd like to group all of these together as well. So I'm going to use that same trick. I'm going to build a div around the second one here. So the second blog entry starts with an H3 called social media. So I'm going to tab over here and put my start to this box. And this box is going to contain all of the second blog entry. So we'll tab over all of these elements individually. I'm going to actually see if there's a shortcut to do this. So let me tab over just the rest of the OL together. I want to tab over all of the rest of this. So I'm just going to try this. I've never done this before here, but it works on some of the editors. If I highlight all of it, notice that I'm not highlighting the end of the body tag because that's not part of our social media entry. I'm going to try tab. Oh my gosh, if you highlight it and press tab, it will tab over the entire group that I highlighted. And now we can see that all of this stuff is inside of this div, but we've got to close our div up. So after this last paragraph, I'm going to unindent by pressing delete and then /div here. And this should put the second blog post inside of a div. Very cool. So coming over here, now that second blog post is inside of the div as well. Now there are a couple of other things thinking about this stylistically that I would like to work on with it. So one of them that stands out to me is right now I've got my two blog entries touching. So the space outside of a box is called the margin, and we worried about that with the left and the right margins. But to space these two boxes out, what we could do is we could increase the space on the outside of this box, so that would be our div, and the space outside of that box is called the margin. In particular, I'm worried about the space outside of this box, not on the left, the right, but the space outside on the bottom. So I'm going to set my margin dash bottom to, I don't know, let's try 10 pixels. And now let's run it. And now we've got 10 pixels of space on the bottom of this box, and I think that looks a lot better with the separation. You might want to make it even more separated, so you can experiment here with the number of pixels that you like. Cool, 15 pixels. Looks a little better to me, a little more readable. I'm also starting to think that I would love to throw a border radius on these to curve the border. So I'm going to go back up here, border radius, and I'm going to just take a guess here, 15 pixels. Let's see how that looks. All right, nice. Well, now we've got like a little curve to those, which I think is looking good. But one thing that kind of stands out to me here is the text is right up against the edge here, and I don't think that looks so good. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some space inside of this box. So space outside of the box, this is called margin, and outside of the box here it was called margin as well. A little bit of space inside of the box has a different name. That's called padding. So I'm going to add, I'm going to add something called padding here. So let me add, I don't know, 20 pixels of padding inside the box. And now we start to get a little bit of space here, a little bit of room from the edge of the box over to the text. And I like the way that looks, actually. All right, for readability, I might want to take this gold and change it a little bit. So I think it was Morgan discovered this trick where if we hover over it, we can change this by dragging it. And that will, oh, that's darker. Okay, that's not good. All right, so let me hover over it again. That looks really bad. I don't like the color that I chose here. Maybe this is better. Okay, maybe like a little bit of like an eggshell type color or something like that. I don't know. I think I would like a thicker border here, so we can change the border by making it a larger number. All right, I like that. And just for some style here, I think I'm going to throw in, for the body of the page, I'm going to throw in a background here that's a gradient. So if you're like me, you probably don't remember how to do this. This is one of our advanced style techniques. So I'm going to search up gradient HTML. W3 School is one of our favorites. I'm going to scroll down here to the first one. Oh, it's linear gradient. And none of these look familiar because we didn't use the language. I liked using the angle measurement. So here it is using angles. And here's an example. So I'm just like going to go in and copy this example. But I don't want it to go from red to yellow. I would like it to go from red to blue. And I don't want it to be 180 degrees. I kind of want it to be like 90 degrees, I think. All right, so here we go. Let's see how this looks. All right, sweet. I think things are coming together. I've got to make some more stylistic choices to complete this. But my goal in this video is to show you a couple of things. Number one, if we want to group together a number of elements, what we need to do is we need to put all of those elements inside of div tags, divider tags, and that will make a box around that group. And then we can style that box the same way that we usually do by selecting the box component and adding these styles to it. So I think there's a lot there to experiment with. You can add all sorts of things. One last thing that might be cool, this is going to be, I don't think this is going to look good here, but I can add a hover selector to my div. And let me just make this hover so that I'm going to change the border color here. So when the div is being hovered over, I'd like my border to be 5 pixels, solid, and green instead. All right, so let me run that over here. And then when I hover over this div, the border turns green. And you can do all sorts of effects. You can make the background, background change here to something like light gray when we hover over it. If only I could type. All right, here we go. Let's refresh. And now when we hover over them, they have unique styles of their own. So hopefully you find this interesting. Divs are a super useful element. They are how we group anything together on a web page. So if you think about those fancy web pages like, I don't know, Wikipedia, let me just go to a random one here, Chaos Game. If we go to Wikipedia, the way that it groups together all of these things in a sidebar is it uses a div. The way it groups together these things, so that these images appear side by side with the paragraphs, this is a div. And if you don't believe me, we can go over here and we can press Inspect Element. And as we inspect the element, we can actually look through the code of this Wikipedia page. And do you see all of these divs up here? These are all ways of grouping things. So all the stuff that we're learning is essential for building any website. All right, I hope you find this video helpful and that you can style your tech blog a little bit more interestingly now. All right, bye.